Good morning.
If you could just again, please state your name and spell your last name for sure.
Yes, it's Trooper Joe Paul. That's P-A-U-L.
And sir, if I could just take you back to a couple different portions of your testimony from Friday. With respect to the acceleration and braking tests that you conducted in the driveway area or outside of the Canton Police Department, was that before or after Ms. Hartnett from Crimes and Services Section had processed the vehicle?
After.
And so as far as anything that was removed by her, that was done prior to you conducting any of your tests, is that correct?
Correct.
Now, you investigated approximately 191 crashes over your time with the cars unit with the state police, correct?
Correct.
Now, I'm going to ask you just some general questions with regard to a number of those crashes have involved motor vehicles, collisions with other motor vehicles, correct?
Yes.
Now, in general terms, with respect to motor vehicle collision, what, if any, you talked a little bit last week about sort of area of impact and point of impact, correct?
Correct.
Now, that's with regard to the roadway, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
So with regard to the vehicles coming in contact with each other, what, if anything, regarding damage would you expect or anticipate based on your experience in general terms when vehicles come in contact or touch with each other in a collision sequence?
Objection. No, I'm going to allow it. In general terms, what do you look for?
So we look, well, it's two times of damage onto a vehicle. One's contact damage and one's induced damage. So when we look at vehicles, we're looking for what's caused contact damage. And the induced damage is basically, let me start from the beginning. So contact damage is the damage that is actually made direct contact with another vehicle. And induced damage is the damage that did not make direct contact. So for example, if you push in one piece of metal to make contact, the rest of the metal will make a rippling effect that would more cause induced damage.
And just again, in general terms, as far as vehicles coming in contact with each other in a collision sequence, what, if anything, would you expect or anticipate based on your experience to sort of transfer from one vehicle to the other event?
It's possible when you transfer, you can have paint transfers that come from one vehicle to another. You got tire rub-off that go from one vehicle to another. Scratches that would come from one vehicle to another.
And again, sir, just in general terms, when it comes to vehicles interacting with each other in a collision sequence, what, if any, role does the respective heights of those vehicles play in respect to contact damage or inducement?
Yeah, it depends on their heights and how they relate to each other. So that kind of shows, if one vehicle's taller, one's smaller, it's going to show where the contact damage would be from one vehicle to another based on their height.
So based on respective heights, contact or induced damage could be in a different location from a bigger vehicle to a smaller vehicle, correct?
Correct.
Now, if I could turn you back to the text stream analysis that you conducted with respect to the defendant's vehicle. Now, the two events that occurred on that 1269 miles deep, there were two events that occurred within that trigger, within that mileage, is that correct?
Correct.
And based on your analysis with respect to the odometer readings and the mileage, where is it, what is your belief as to where the vehicle was when those two events, being the three-point turn and the backup straight for approximately 60 some odd feet, where did those occur within the travel path of the defendant's vehicle?
So the first one with the three-point turn, in this case, it appeared to be possibly onto it was a Cedar Crest, which, because we know based on testimonies that she missed the exit to Fairview and had to make a U-turn onto Cedar Crest, and that would make sense to why they would occur with close proximity to each other. They're within the same odometer mileage and on the same key cycle.
And so that occurs at 24.2 miles per hour for 60 some odd feet. Where would that have occurred geographically from your view of the odometer reading?
It should occur probably on Fairview.
Now, sir, based on the totality of your analysis and your investigation in this case, what, if any, conclusions did you come to as to how this collision sequence occurred or how this crash occurred?
Yes. Should I go my report for that, or should you want me to just kind of go off
Are you
it?
guys going to look at your report? So,
Yes.
sure, go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me continue.
If you could, please.
Okay.
What, if any, conclusions did you come to through the course of your investigation?
So on Saturday, January 29th, 2022, at approximately 12:45.
So you can look at your report, but you can't read your report.
I
So
read my conclusions based on what they asked me to do. Okay.
yeah. So I can't hear you.
Sorry.
Okay. So just take your time, read your report, and then answer Mr. Lally's question. And if you need to look at your report, we'll see about that again.
All right.
Ask the question, Mr. Lally.
Based on the totality of your investigation, what, if any, conclusions did you come to with regard to how this collision occurred?
So this collision occurred on Saturday, January 29th, 2022, at approximately 12:45 hours. A 2021 Lexus LX570 was traveling southbound on Fairview Road, in Area 34 Fairview Road.
Yeah. So,
I'm trying to close it.
you know what? I don't, Mr. Lally, break this down. Ask
Yes, please.
simple questions so that the witness can answer your questions. We don't need a narrative.
From your investigation, what, if any, conclusions did you come to as to where this collision occurred?
So, all right. So on the night of Saturday, January 2022, at approximately 12:45 hours, a 2021 Lexus LX 570.
Can you slow down, sir?
Yes.
So forget all that part,
Okay.
Trooper.
All
Just
right.
answer the question.
Okay.
Where did it occur?
It occurred in the area of 34 Fairview Road.
And who, if anyone, were the participants in this collision sequence?
The operator appeared to be Karen Reed, and the pedestrian was John O'Keefe.
And where was the vehicle located in reference to the residence of 34 Fairview Road?
It was located along the southbound travel lane and to the left side of the house as you look at it from the front.
And as far as the vehicle, what, if any, directionality did it head in, and what, if any, interaction did it have with Mr. O'Keefe?
So the vehicle was traveling in reverse along the southbound travel lane, traveling north.
And how fast was the vehicle traveling and over what distance?
The vehicle traveled up to 24 miles per hour and approximately 62 feet.
And at the time that the vehicle was traveling approximately 24 miles per hour over approximately 62 feet, what, if anything, occurred then?
The right rear of the Lexus struck the pedestrian John O'Keefe.
And post-collision, what, if anything, occurred with regard to Mr. O'Keefe?
Mr. O'Keefe was projected forward and to the left along the front yard of 34 Fairview Road.
And post-collision with Mr. O'Keefe, what, if anything, did the defendant's vehicle?
The Lexus continued traveling in reverse before they left the area.
Now, as far as the vehicle itself, from your inspection, what, if any, role did any mechanical aspects of the vehicle play in this collision?
There were no mechanical defects.
As far as your analysis of the roadway and other factors related to that, what, if any, role did they play in this collision sequence?
There were no roadway or environmental factors that contributed to this collision.
Now, sir, with respect to your investigation, what, if any, opinions did you draw based on your training and experience in regard to this collision and how it occurred?
May I look at my report real quick? Just to make sure.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So throughout my investigation, this appeared to be a single car collision involving a pedestrian. The vehicle was traveling at a higher acceleration when. Sorry. The vehicle accelerated at a high rate of speed before she struck the pedestrian John O'Keefe on the roadway and subsequently left him at the scene.
And with respect to the backup safety system that you observed in this vehicle and made use of in the course of your visibility analysis, what, if any, role do you, is it your opinion that that played in how this crash occurred?
Based on the visibility analysis. So even if the camera systems were covered in snow, even the systems were defective anyway, and even the mirrors were blocked, an attentive and reasonable operator would not travel in reverse, especially at a high rate of speed. They would have cleaned the mirrors off. They would have made the cameras and systems, if they worked, they didn't work, they would have done all this prior to accelerating in reverse.
The objection sustained.
Move to strike.
I'm going to strike that.
Now, with respect to your observations during the course of the visibility analysis, the exemplar pedestrian that you placed in the right rear of the vehicle, was that exemplar pedestrian visible to you at the time that you conducted that visibility analysis?
Yes, it was.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions.
Okay. Cross-examination?
Thank you, Your Honor.
So do you have any, do you hold any degrees in the scientific discipline of mathematics?
I do not.
Do you hold any degrees in the scientific discipline of physics?
I do not.
Hold any degrees in the scientific discipline of biomechanics?
No.
How about in engineering?
No.
How about in kinematics?
No.
What's the highest degree that you do hold, sir?
I have an associate's degree.
In what?
Administration of justice.
You mentioned kinematics on Friday. Do you hold any certificates in the specific area of kinematics?
Yes, it's covered in the basic crash investigation classes.
Okay, so you took a class, in other words, correct?
Multiple classes.
They introduced the idea of what kinematics is, right?
Correct.
You testified about that on Friday.
Yes.
Define kinematics, if it's yours.
It deals with the aspect of motion.
It's a subfield of what broader field?
Kinematics?
Kinematics is a subfield of what broader discipline of science?
I'm not sure.
Physics, correct?
Yes.
And it describes how points and objects, systems of objects, how they move, and how the rate they move and the rate of their velocity, correct?
It deals with emotions.
What's that called? The rate of velocity. What's another word for that?
The rate of velocity?
Right.
I mean, it deals with motion. It deals with forward and also deals with speed. It deals with travel and speed. If something's moving, it also has a speed to it.
Right. The word you're looking for is acceleration, correct?
Sure.
What role does acceleration play in the field of kinematics?
What role does acceleration play in kinematics?
Right.
It talks about, like you just said, it talks about the speed and it talks about motion.
Is kinematics also known as the geometry of motion? Is that correct?
I have not heard that.
Never heard that. What's the difference between constrained and unconstrained motion?
Constrained and unconstrained motion?
That's what I asked.
Constrained motion. I can't recollect at the moment.
Constrained motion is motion on a predetermined path, isn't it?
Yes.
Unconstrained motion is what?
When it doesn't have a predetermined path?
Free movement, right?
Correct.
Can you remember that from your class?
For the most part, we don't go that constrained and unconstrained.
Constrained and unconstrained, not restrained.
That's what I said. Sorry, unconstrained. Yes.
Kinematics uses algebraic formula to model these motions, right? The motions of these points, systems of points, correct?
Yes.
And it includes concepts like displacement and speed, velocity, distance, acceleration, which we've talked about, correct?
Correct.
And it looks at how these things, these values vary over a point in time, or duration in time. Is that right? Do
Yes.
you actually understand the physics behind the study of kinematics?
Yes.
What you learned in class?
Yes, we had to go over the physics part of it.
On Friday, you said that this incident is a pedestrian strike from a vehicle. You reiterated that again this morning. Is that right?
Correct.
I want to be clear. That is your opinion based on your training and experience, correct?
Yes.
And on Friday, you said you based that opinion on the fact that you noted a half-mile-an-hour decrease in speed and a steering input of less than 10 degrees at some point in that reverse motion, correct?
I said that was consistent. That data point in general was consistent with something that you would see with the data of a pedestrian striker striking something else. I do go in my report saying I can't say that's definitively where a pedestrian was struck, but
I'm sorry,
it wasn't definitively. Sorry, in my report I do say I can't say that is definitively where the pedestrian struck.
You cannot say it.
Definitively, yes.
Okay, so you're going to have to slow down and speak up, okay?
All right.
You just said, I just want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly, and I apologize.
Okay.
You said you cannot say definitively that resulted in a pedestrian strike.
That data point within the text stream data is what I'm talking about.
Okay.
That specific points, that time frame.
Because there's a multitude of reasons why when someone is driving in reverse, they might slow down by half a mile an hour, right?
It's when I say when it's consistent, is because there's the other aspects of it is the fact that the accelerator is consistently strong.
Let him answer. Finish your answer.
So the accelerator is at a constant rate, and then it just drops by half a mile, and the steering wheel all of a sudden abruptly goes to the right. That's what I'm talking about when I say it is consistent with a pedestrian strike. That's something that you would see. It's not going to be a huge change of speed during this collision.
You also note that at the time, it had begun to snow, correct?
Yes.
There would be snow on the lawn, right?
Correct.
There would be snow on the cars,
Yes.
snow on the trees,
Yes.
snow on the roadway.
Yes.
Snow on the roadway could impact how tires move over the roadway, correct?
In a way.
And obviously, there are a multitude of reasons why somebody might input a 10-degree input on a steering wheel, correct?
Correct. That's why I said I couldn't definitely say it.
Right. So every time somebody slows down, going in reverse or forward, and introduces a 10-degree input on the steering wheel, doesn't mean they're looking to hit a pedestrian, correct?
Correct.
You testified that you determined the area of impact by basically following, if I heard your testimony correctly, basically following the debris field from the body from where you believed John O'Keefe's body's final resting place was, almost linearly to the furthermost piece of debris that was found. Did I get that right?
Yes.
In other words, you established what in your mind, or what you were told was his final resting place, and what you were told was the debris field. And you indicated that the furthermost piece of debris would basically be the area of impact, right?
It's within that line. I didn't say that is the area impact where the furthermost piece of evidence is.
Right.
It's just the linear, like you said earlier, it's that linear. We're going that path. That's the path that he traveled post impact with the vehicle.
And that is on which, that fact that you stated is on which what you, it's a terrible question. That's the basis for your opinion of where the area of impact was, correct?
Yes.
Let's take a look at exhibit, with the court's permission, 587. It's your diagram 3. If I may approach it on this verb.
Okay?
May I approach?
Yes.
So you can see it. Your Honor, you publish exhibit 587.
Yes.
diagram 3. Okay. Sir, you see diagram 3 on the board. You also have it in front of you, correct?
Yes.
It's easier for you to refer to what's in front of you because that's a little bit further away. Just let me know.
Okay.
The red arrows adjacent to the blue writing, where I'm highlighting right now, indicate basically the debris field that you explained to the jurors on Friday, correct?
Yes.
And then there's a point of an arrow that comes back to a wording that says pedestrian's final rest, basically right there, correct?
Yes.
And the debris field ends right in the middle of that spotlight, correct?
Yes.
All right. So that's the area of impact that you indicated to Mr. Lally you believe occurred because of the debris field and the linear portion of that debris field going from the pedestrian's final rest all the way out to that final little red arrow that says red plastic B in parentheses, correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, can we have exhibit 492 published to the juror, please?
Okay?
Approach.
Yes.
While that's coming up, have you ever seen this?
No, I haven't.
Take a look just above the arrow. Your Honor, with court permission, maybe highlight or magnify the area just above the arrow.
Okay.
You see that?
Yes, I do.
Right underneath fire hydrant, correct?
Correct.
What does that look like to you?
A piece of plastic.
It's debris, correct?
Correct.
All right. Can we go back with the court's permission to exhibit 87?
Okay.
Diagram 3. You see the fire hydrant?
Yes.
Fire hydrant's right there, correct?
Correct.
That's another, according to your scale, that's probably a good 30 feet from the pedestrian's final rest, correct?
Yeah, that's about right.
That is the furthermost in this diagram, the furthermost piece of debris on the diagram, correct?
Correct.
So now, your testimony changed that this, in fact, is the area of impact.
No,
Why not?
because it's just a piece of debris. I'm talking about the path. You follow the path of debris field. Debris can move and change.
The debris doesn't fly backward, does it?
I'm saying you pointed to like just the fire hydrant as the area impact where the debris, where that one piece of plastic was, saying that's the area impact is right next to the fire hydrant.
Are you asking me a question?
Yeah, that's what you said, right?
I'm asking you,
I'm making sure I'm understanding what you're saying so I can answer the right.
Ask the question again, Mr. Jackson.
in fact, you indicated on Friday that your analysis of the area of impact was predicated on, based on, the furthermost piece of debris from the pedestrian's body that you were aware of, which is right there. Red plastic B, correct?
I said well, I said you said earlier with the linear equation. I mean, it might have moved it over more, but it's the debris, the start of that debris, and when that is, I can't say that's definitely the point of area impact or the point of impact.
You can't.
I cannot say that is the point of impact right there. You just kind of follow the linear path because they have to follow in a direct path that way.
Okay, so now your testimony is that's not the area of impact.
I never said that was the area impact. I said it's after that.
Trooper, we were all here on Friday.
Okay.
That's exactly what you said under questioning by Mr. Wiley, wasn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
Didn't you say on Friday that you determined the area of impact for Mr. O'Keefe? The point of impact was red plastic B because that was the furthermost piece of debris you were aware of from the final point of rest for Mr. O'Keefe's body. Isn't that what you said?
I don't believe that's my exact words.
Okay, I'm not asking if it was your exact words. I don't have a transcript of it. I'm asking you, is that what you tried to impart to the jurors?
What I said to the jury, I said after that. That's the start of that's the last point of evidence that I had. I said the area impact is probably along the roadway after that point. I mean, like before it. If you have to walk towards him.
I'm sorry, I keep doing that because I think you're done. Are you done?
I am done now. Sir.
Now you're aware that there's a piece of debris, looks like taillight material, right under the fire hydrant, correct?
Correct.
If the area of impact, which you indicated on Friday was where this red plastic B is, you would be wrong, right? Your analysis would be flawed.
No, because that's not what I said. I said it's along the roadway. It's going to be after that point.
Okay, so is the area of impact now where the fire hydrant is?
Objection.
Ask it differently.
Are you now indicating, because now you realize that there's a piece of debris directly under the fire hydrant, are you now indicating that that's the area of impact where John O'Keefe's body was struck?
Objection.
Sustained.
Let's take a look at exhibit, with the court's permission, 279.
Okay.
Take a look at exhibit 279. I want to draw your attention to that piece right there of plastic. You see it?
Yes.
Can you describe it for me? Just physically, what does that look like?
It looks like clear plastic with a little bit of red and the black on the top part.
Okay. Maybe in a triangular shape, is that fair?
Correct.
Okay. Now if we could go back to, with the court's permission, exhibit 492,
Okay.
and highlight just above the ruler. How would you describe that piece of material?
It looks like the same piece.
Does that, based on that, does that appear to be part of the taillight material that was found at the scene?
Correct.
Okay. Now, based on that, are you now suggesting, if we could go with the court's permission, if we could go back to 587, I'll stop jumping around just a second. I think we
Okay.
just get back to 587. Oh, sorry, the diagram. Thanks. There we go. Now, seeing what you've just now seen in terms of that piece of plastic that appears to be from the taillight, does that appear to be under the fire hydrant, which is highlighted? Same piece.
Yes.
Okay. Based on that, does that change your opinion? Is that now, the fire hydrant now, the point of impact?
No.
Where's the point of impact now?
It's along the roadway. I don't know the exact point of impact.
So you don't know the area of impact?
I said the area impact is along the roadway after the debris.
Okay.
I mean, the only thing it would change is maybe it was a little further away. But besides that, it's a linear field. I'm not talking about like one point. You kind of follow the middle of the debris field, and that should be the path.
Well, if the point of impact is along the roadway, where along the roadway, if you can show the jurors, where along the roadway, in your expert opinion, was the point of impact?
It should be within, if you follow from pedestrian's final rest here, just kind of follow back. That's what I'm talking about, linear field.
So now you've indicated an area, I can follow your laser pointer, an area along here, correct?
Yes, somewhere in there.
All right, if I have my spotlight, is that, if I leave it right there, is that about where the middle of the spotlight, about where you believe the area of impact is?
It's within, I guess you can say it's within that area. I don't know, definitely there's nothing on the roadway that has a definitive point that says this is the area impact right here. It's within the roadway based on the evidence at the scene.
Okay. Mr. Paul, sorry, Trooper Paul, I'm asking you, based on your expert opinion and your conclusions, based on your full analysis, can you point me to within an area of 5 feet or so on the roadway where you believe the area of impact is? Is my spotlight basically highlighting the area that you believe, in your opinion, was the area of impact?
You have that laser pointer?
I do.
Why don't we let him show you? It'd be easier for the jury to see.
So what I'm trying to say is, so you follow the linear path back around this area.
Okay, can you...
And sorry, I'm trying to keep it straight as much as I can. Follow back to here. I can't say like if this definitely is, but it's possibly based on also vehicle damage to the back of the vehicle. So if you follow all the way back to here, that could be a possible area impact.
So when you say that area there, just I want to be very clear for the record, that what you highlighted is an area basically just to the left of an X that's on the roadway, on the bottom of diagram 3, toward the lower part of diagram 3.
It's
correct?
You would use your circle almost kind of be a good area around.
Sorry,
You can use a circle around here. This would be around the area.
Okay.
Okay.
So using your scale, that scale is going from full left to full right, plus or minus 40 feet, right?
Switch. Can't see it. So say again. Say the question.
That scale is 40 feet, going full left, full right, 40 feet.
It's 40 feet. It's a 10-foot scale.
Okay, sorry, 20 feet. My mistake.
That was yeah.
I was terrible. 20 feet. Thank you. All right, so if you use that scale, can you estimate for the jurors? I'm just going to use this X as a starting point. You estimate for the jurors from this X that I've highlighted, the pedestrian's final rest. What's that number? Doesn't have to be exact. Give me an estimate.
So I mean, it could be within 30 feet because also on my scale, this 2 and 3 is 50 feet from each other.
It's how much?
50.
Okay.
50.
50.
So would you agree that from this X down here to the pedestrian's final rest, that's a crowflies, that's probably a good 35, 40 feet.
I mean, I could try to use the scale, but it is me as a scale.
If you wouldn't mind. Can you use paper?
Yes, please.
With permission?
Okay.
Just blank piece of paper.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
You need a pen?
I got one. Thank you. It's approximately 30 feet.
Approximately 30 feet?
Yes.
Okay. Can you place, with the court's permission, can you estimate 30 feet in here?
Can I estimate?
Can you point to a place in the courtroom that looks like it's 30 feet from you?
Objection.
No. Next question.
Does the court have a diagram of the diagram of distances?
In this courtroom? No.
You indicated just now, and then I'm finished with this. Thank you. Thanks. You indicated just now, in answer to Mr. Lowry's last couple questions, that in your expert opinion, when the SUV struck pedestrian John O'Keefe, he was, quote, projected forward and to the left, to the front yard to his final place of rest.
Yes.
So your expert testimony is that John O'Keefe was hit with the SUV and flew 30 feet.
Projected mean like I don't think he flew all the way there. He was projected in that way. He got pushed forward in that direction.
Which he was rendered incapacitated, landed there, and had to sort of fly there, correct? He didn't walk there.
I mean, would you definitely flying like literally off the ground the whole entire time, or?
Well, you tell me, you're the expert.
I mean, when we say projected, we mean he gets projected, and they usually have a landing phase, and they land, and they either roll or tumble to final rest.
Okay, how far do you think he landed? How far was it until he landed, of that 30 feet?
I don't know. There's no indication of where his exact landing spot was.
Right. Was there any evidence whatsoever that he landed and rolled?
And there was no evidence that he landed or rolled. Or no, rolled.
According to you, the evidence that you have in front of you is that he get hit, fly 30 feet, land where he ended up in his final rest, right?
Objection.
Sustained. Ask it differently.
Based on your expert opinion, you believe that he was projected through the air to his final rest place.
That's not what I was saying.
But you said there's no evidence that he rolled.
And there's no evidence that he flew through the air either.
Exactly. Right? Exactly.
Objection.
Sustained.
You said on Friday that in your experience, people tend to lose objects that are not strapped to them. Is that right?
Yes.
In other words, get hit by something, car, truck, bus, whatever, train, and if you have something in your hand, boom, you lose it, you drop it, if it's not strapped to you, correct?
Correct.
How do you suppose that Mr. O'Keefe, in your opinion, held onto that glass cup that was found right next to him over the course of 30 feet being projected?
Objection.
I'll allow it. Do you have a theory on that?
I don't know. I mean, it just could have been with him the whole way. I don't know. I wasn't there, so I don't know how the glass stayed with his body and went with him to the final rest.
So I mean, it's just common sense. You didn't believe it. So it was in his hand. He held onto it the entire time it was being projected. Right?
It's possibly, it could have been his hand, it could have been tucked next to his clothing. Could, you know,
Did you say tucked in?
I mean, like, could have been next to his body. So when he projected, made the glass was with his body as it was also flying. So there's a number of reasons why the glass also got projected with the body while he was holding it.
I thought you said on Friday, and you just agreed with me, that people drop things and they're hit.
Yes, body, not everything, it tends to fly off. I mean, some stuff flies off, some stuff will stay on.
I see.
It's not uncommon to find piece of clothing and stuff, you know, that you find at the scene.
Piece of clothing?
Like clothing, like shoes, like shoes and stuff like that to come off the body during a pedestrian crash.
Well, that's not what I asked.
I know, I'm just saying, you asked me, you said I'm just responding to what you said. I'm trying to make sure you understand what I'm saying.
No, I don't, but I'll ask another question. Shoes are strapped on by definition, right?
Yes, but it's very common for shoes to come off.
How about a cell phone?
Cell phone, yeah, it all depends. Depends on where it is.
Well, it was under his body.
Okay.
How do you account for that? He held onto his cell phone with one hand and held onto the cup with the other.
Objection.
Sustained. Ask it differently.
If the cell phone was found under his torso, under his body, what's your theory on how that cell phone ended up flying 30 feet with it?
It just did.
Just did. And somehow, as he landed, tucked that cell phone underneath his body so he landed on top of it.
It just did. That's the evidence at the scene. I didn't put the evidence there. So
Well, you didn't.
Objection.
All right, so jurors, I've told you before, lawyers cannot make comments, so disregard it. Mr. Jackson, don't do it
I
again.
understand. So
You understand, but don't do it. Your answer is always, I understand. Don't do it.
Yes, Your Honor. Cell phone in one hand, cup in the other hand, blue through the air, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
You were informed of this incident on January 29th, 2022 at about 2:30 in the afternoon. Is that right?
yes,
At the time, you were working out of the Cars facility, which is located on West Grove Street in Middleborough. Is that right?
yes,
By the way, that's a facility that has multiple garages. Sally ports, I don't know if they're called Sally ports, but garage bays, correct?
the mechanic shop are there.
The mechanic shop?
Yes.
Is if you're going to review, for instance, for purposes of reconstruction, if you're going to review a vehicle, is the vehicle placed in those mechanics bays?
No, not there. That's for state police vehicles.
Okay, so where are the mechanics bays? Sorry, reverse that. Where are the Sally ports where you do your analysis, your reconstruction, your review of the vehicle, inspections, things of that nature?
We don't have Sally ports for that.
You don't have anything dedicated to that?
No, the only time we would use a Sally port is crime scene would have some Sally ports that they would do to document their crime scene stuff. And I've gone there to do my inspections, but most of our inspections are done either at the tow yard or some type of facility for that.
Ultimately, was this SUV ever taken to the Middleborough facility?
Yes, it was.
Where was it placed?
There's a fenced-in area inside it. It's a fenced-in area
Is it outside or inside?
outside.
Okay. Did it remain outside in that fenced-in area the whole time?
I don't know the exact time. It was there for a while, then it got moved.
Where did it get moved to?
I'm not sure exactly where they moved it immediately after it left Middleborough.
Are you familiar with the Foxborough location?
Yes.
Does that have Sally ports or bays for inspection and evaluation?
It has garages in it, but we wouldn't use them. We don't normally use those garages for inspections.
Is it possible to use those garages for inspections?
It is possible.
Okay. It's happened before, correct?
I've not used the inspection in the garages.
But,
I'm going to ask you to keep your voice up and
Sorry,
speak
yes.
slowly.
but you know that it could be used.
Sorry.
You know that those bays could be used for inspections or analysis or evaluation if needed, correct?
Yes.
All right. Given the fact that the SUV that was being seized on January 29th was being seized as potential evidence, best practices would suggest that you want to get it in and out of the bad weather, the inclement weather, as quickly as possible, correct? You wouldn't want to subject it to continued forces from nature like rain, wind, snow, sleet, hail, right?
That would be beneficial, yes.
All right. You're aware that the Foxborough location and the Middleborough location with the mechanics bays are all closer to Dighton than Canton, right?
Both Foxborough and
Foxborough and Middleborough are both closer to Dighton than Canton. In other words, you have to pass by, depending on which way you go, pass by Middleborough, pass by Foxborough to get to Canton.
so from where?
From Dighton, sorry.
So from Dighton.
Where the vehicle was seized, in
Yep.
all going toward Canton, you pass by either Middleborough or Foxborough to get to Canton, correct?
I don't believe you'd pass by Middleborough to get to Canton, but you've passed by Foxborough.
All right. The car was not taken to Foxborough, was it?
No.
As a matter of fact, the car was taken basically double the distance all the way to Canton to that Sally port, correct?
Objection.
Do you know that? Is that double the distance?
I don't know the exact distance. I know it was in Canton.
And you know it's far to Canton,
From Dighton, yes.
right? And you're also aware that because you've been to the scene, assuming correct, the 34 Fairview,
Yes, I have.
and you've been to Canton, PD,
Yes, I have.
you know that those two locations are about 3-4 minutes apart.
Yeah, I can say that.
When you started let me ask this in a different way. Before you began any review on this case, any physical review on this case or analysis on the case, you were told that there had been a crash, correct?
Yes.
You testified to that at the state court grand jury in this matter. Is that right? That you've been told in advance this was a vehicle pedestrian crash, and you were asked to analyze it, right?
Yes.
You wrote in the report that it was a single vehicle collision involving a pedestrian, and you were, quote, assigned to reconstruct that collision, correct?
Yes.
So when you began your analysis, Trooper Paul, you were told conclusively by the lead investigator, Michael Proctor, that the deceased was hit by a car, and your job was to reconstruct it. Is that right?
Objection.
Okay, so there are lots of parts to that. Break it down.
Sure. Were you told by Michael Proctor to reconstruct this incident?
Objection.
So were you told that by Trooper Proctor?
I was not.
Okay, next question.
Sure. Who were you given your instructions by
Instructions for what?
to reconstruct this incident?
I wasn't given instructions to reconstruct it. It's just I was assigned to it.
Right.
That was requested. My assistance was requested to reconstruct it.
That's my question. Who assigned you to it?
I talked to my sergeant at the time who gave me the phone call.
And you were told some basics about that reconstruction, the event that you were asked to reconstruct, correct?
Yes.
The information that you were told came from the case officer. Is that right?
Who's the case officer?
The information that this was a pedestrian vehicle incident, as opposed to motor vehicle incident, pedestrian bicycle, motor vehicle motorcycle. You were told it was a motor vehicle pedestrian incident that you were asked to reconstruct, correct?
Yeah, I was told that, yes.
All right, and you had to be given some basic parameters of how that incident occurred. Car was going in reverse, it's got a damaged taillight, things like that. Right?
Some basic stuff, yeah.
What I'm asking is, I'm trying to get to is, who gave you that information? Where'd it come from?
That the car was traveling in, like, which part of the information? You asked me about several different things just now.
Were you given information from multiple sources? Or did someone give you a summary of what you were being asked to do? At the very beginning,
Yep.
who gave you the summary
Summary of the whole entire, of what?
of the event that you were asked to reconstruct?
I was passed down when I got to the garage. There was nobody that sat there and gave me the summary, like, that I can remember. I was told that it was a pedestrian crash. I knew it was a Boston police officer involved, that this was a vehicle, and that it was traveling in reverse. That's all they had.
Okay. What I'm asking is, that's great. Thank you for the summary. Who gave you that summary?
I don't know if it was definitely anybody from the get-go that was like I talked to.
From where?
I don't know if it's anybody that I could definitely say that was the person. There was multiple people going around when I got there. I think I talked to Trooper Zach Clark. He was doing the crime scene. I think he was Zach Clark. He was the crime scene photos at the time. I knew him from past crashes. He just said this is the vehicle, and I think he kind of gave me a little bit of a lowdown on what the vehicle was.
Okay.
So
My question is this. When you got that, did you call it a lowdown? Gave you the lowdown?
he gave me information, yes.
Right. When you got the lowdown, you were told Boston police officer was involved. The vehicle pedestrian incident, car was going in reverse, ultimately led to the death of the pedestrian. Struck the pedestrian in reverse, correct?
Correct.
All right. And you were assigned specifically to try to reconstruct that incident.
Yes.
Have you ever heard of the phrase confirmation bias?
I know the phrase, yes.
You know what it means?
I can't definitely say what it means.
Developing a conclusion and then trying to find evidence to fit that conclusion. Does that sound right?
If you say so.
You noted in your direct examination that there were scratches on the passenger side rear bumper of the Lexus, correct?
Yes.
How exactly were you able to scientifically determine that any of those scratches were from an incident on January 29th, 2022, as opposed to any other time?
I didn't have anything else on the time. Is that those scratches happened prior to this collision?
I'm sorry.
I didn't have any information that those scratches were caused from a prior collision. And so when I looked at the evidence, I knew it was in that same area, the right rear tail light. So when I looked at it, it didn't quite fit the pedestrian thing. So when you showed me the video, or I saw the video like a year ago on Court TV, I said that could be.
You asked the question, so next, keep going. He's answering. Next question. Then
Yes,
go
I
ahead.
scientifically
Hold on.
thought the scratches were.
Hold on. Ask
Sorry.
your question, Mr. Jackson.
You know what normal wear and tear on a vehicle is, right?
Yes.
Bumpers get scratched myriad ways, correct?
Correct.
Get scratched in a grocery store parking lot, right?
Yes.
Shopping cart can bounce off the back of the car, scratch the bumper, scratch the side of the car, a quarter pound or something, right?
Sure.
I mean, I don't want to go through it, but there's thousands and thousands and thousands of ways that a car can get a scratch, correct?
Correct.
My question is, do you, as you sit here, do you have any scientific evidence that those scratches occurred on January 29th at approximately 12:45 a.m.?
What do you mean by scientific evidence?
Well, do you have any evidence whatsoever that you can point to that those scratches occurred on that date and at that time, rather than any other time in the history of that vehicle?
Like I said earlier, the video seems to appear that's what it looks like that could have been from.
Well, you said on Friday, let's talk about those scratches for a second. Because
Yeah.
when you testified Friday, you were pretty clear. You said that, if I can find it exactly. Let me have just a moment, Your Honor.
Sure.
You said, quote, the dent and scratches for his hand could be, those are consistent with striking the Lexus. You remember saying that?
Yes, on the tailgate.
Okay, so the dent and scratches you talked about on Friday, you said it was from his hand.
Yes, hand in the glass cup.
Okay. Then are those the same scratches you're talking about in terms of the bumper?
No.
So,
What are you talking about? The scratch inside the bumper that we talk about?
correct.
Okay,
That's what I'm
no.
asking about. Okay. Is there any way to scientifically date a scratch?
No.
If you go out in the parking lot right now, even as an accident reconstructionist, you walk out in the parking lot right now and look at a Toyota Camry sitting there. It's got a scratch on it. There's no analysis that you can engage in to date that scratch, could you?
Objection.
So you can ask it differently, Mr. Jackson.
Is there any way that you could, in general, look at a scratch and say, that scratch is from such and such date?
Objection.
I'll allow
Nothing
it.
more.
I'll allow it.
You cannot say, you can look at evidence and shows that it may have been older than what the newer evidence would be, but there's no way to say that specific date and time and that a scratch would came from.
Right. And it's possible that any or all of those scratches on the Lexus could have predated January 29th, correct?
No.
That's not possible.
The ones that are on from the taillight and the other parts of it,
Scratches anywhere on the car.
depends on what you got to pick the other scratches. You got to show me other scratches on the car.
I'm saying it's possible, since you can't date the scratch, it's possible that any or all of those scratches could predate January 29th. It's a simple question, right? It's possible.
You're being pretty broad on your scratches here.
I'm not being brought it. Let me ask it a different way. Let me ask it again. Is it possible that any or all of the scratches noted on that car predate January 29th?
Any and all of the scratches? See, that's what I'm saying. You're being pretty broad. Any and all scratches on the car
Answer that question. If
that it
it's
predate. Objection. I don't know every single scratch on that car. I could mean,
Overruled. So can you answer that question?
no.
You testified that you noted glass on the rear bumper of the SUV, correct?
Yes.
And you said something about that glass coming from the cup.
Correct.
You also said that you did not see anything on that SUV that could be the source of those glass pieces on the bumper, right?
Yes.
When you did your reconstruction and your analysis, were you informed that none of the glass pieces, not one of them, would be matched to the cup?
I don't know anything about I don't know that.
So if you knew that the glass pieces on the bumper do not match the cup, would that change your opinion
Objection.
about that glass?
Can you answer that question?
I cannot.
You can't answer the question?
It's what was told to me as evidence
Got it. By whom?
by the crime scene.
Who told you?
As crime scene that was there, it says there's glass in the cup. When I did my initial inspection, that's what it was on from.
That's not what you just said. You said that's what was told to me.
Yeah, by crime. No, I said by crime scene. While I was at my inspection,
Wait, what?
it was told to me by the crime scene when I was at my inspection, at the initial inspection.
So what you meant by that's what was told to me is the crime scene talked to you.
Yes.
The crime scene say anything else?
I don't know what else you want me to say.
Did Trooper Proctor tell you that those pieces of glass on the bumper were somehow associated with the cup?
No.
Just the crime scene told you.
Correct.
But if you knew that the crime scene was incorrect, and in fact those glass pieces don't match the cup, would that change your opinion?
Objection.
Sustained.
Would it change your opinion in any way if you knew that the glass pieces do not match the cup?
Objection.
I'll allow that. Can you answer that question?
No.
I'm sorry. No.
I don't. It's glass from a cup. It's glass. It's not. It doesn't belong to the vehicle.
Right.
It's glass.
But if I told you it didn't match that cup,
What?
your opinion.
Objection.
Does that change your opinion?
Are we talking which cup? We never established which cup we're talking about.
How many cups have we been talking about, Trooper?
You said that cup. From the scene. Okay.
That cup. I'm talking.
I just want to make sure that we're on the clear path here. I'm clear what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Really sure.
All I said
It was
it's
found next to John O'Keefe's body in the snow at 34 Fairview on January 29, 2022. You got the cup in mind?
Yes.
Okay. That's the cup. When I say cup, that's the cup.
okay.
Would it change your opinion if I told you that the glass pieces on the bumper don't match that cup?
What's my opinion on it? All I said was glass from a cup. That's the only opinion I had. It's glass from a cup that was on a bumper.
Are you saying a cup?
A cup. A cup. It's not glass from the car. That was my opinion on it. I didn't never said it matched to the scene.
You didn't.
I never said that in my thing. I said it's glass from a cup.
Okay. It's safe to say you didn't do any testing to determine the forces necessary to shatter a taillight on a 2021 Lexus 570, correct?
I did not do testing.
Your report indicates, we talked about this a little bit, I'm going to go back to something you talked about earlier this morning. Your report indicates that John O'Keefe came to his final resting place about 7 feet from the roadway, and that's what you based your diagram on, correct?
Yes.
Who told you that number?
I measured it from my diagram.
You should say that again?
I measured it from the diagram.
Okay, what I'm asking is how did it get on the diagram? In other words, who told you that his body was 7 feet from the roadway?
Well, wait, I was told by Lieutenant Gallagher, Paul Gallagher, Canton PT. He told me this is where the body was found. So I used my devices to mark that location.
Okay, but before you used your devices, he just pointed someplace on the ground and said he was about here, correct?
That's correct.
Did Lieutenant Gallagher tell you that Lieutenant Gallagher never saw John O'Keefe in place at the scene? Did he say that?
No.
Did Lieutenant Gallagher tell you that the first officer on the scene estimated his body being approximately 15 to 20 feet from the roadway?
No.
If he had told you that it changed your diagram?
Objection.
He told me this is where he was found. I marked that location. That's all it was.
And you marked basically every other piece of item, sorry, that was a terrible question. Every other item you marked based on a distance from where you were told John O'Keefe's body came to rest, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and that was by Lieutenant Gallagher just pointing at the ground and saying it was about here.
Correct.
Was there a single member of the team that was out when you were being shown where the body came to rest? Was there a single member of that team who actually said they saw John O'Keefe's body in place?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
What do you mean team? Canton PD?
Whoever was there. Who was there with you when you started doing your measurements, et cetera?
Report therapy. Lieutenant Gallagher, that dude.
Just you and him?
And myself, and I was training a trooper at the time. She was there.
You were training a trooper at the time?
Yes.
Okay, so it was my mistake. I assumed that there were several people out there. Just you and Lieutenant Gallagher.
Yes, that's why I was confused by the team.
All right. And again, Lieutenant Gallagher didn't tell you that he never saw John O'Keefe's body in place.
No, I don't think so.
You did document in your report that the items that you noted on your diagram that we just looked at a few minutes ago, those were found by the CERT team, correct?
Yes.
And you indicated in your report that the members of the CERT team located a single Nike sneaker that's noted on your report. Is that right? On your
Correct.
diagram, rather.
Yes.
You also indicated that, quote, in the same area, 2 red plastic pieces and 1 clear piece of plastic of a taillight was discovered.
Yes.
So your report is clear that in total, the items discovered by the CERT team on January 29th were a shoe, right?
Yes.
A partial glass cup broken, correct?
Well, was that on there? I can't remember if that's on their diagram or if that's what I was told at the scene, but yes.
Sure.
Yes.
You knew that a cup was found?
Yes.
Or you were told a cup was found?
Yes.
And 3 pieces of plastic, 2 red, 1 clear.
Yes.
Not 5 pieces of plastic, correct?
Correct.
You then measured those items, is that right?
I didn't. What do you mean measure them?
Measured them relative to John O'Keefe's final place of rest. 10 feet from it, 12 feet from it, we're going to go over the numbers.
Yes, I used their report to place those items onto my diagram.
So, and I'm going to get to that question in just a second. I want to make sure that we walk through it sort of methodically. You then use some calculation, some tool or something to measure distances. Like there's where I assume John O'Keefe's body was. There's a final rest place. I'm going to use that as point A, and then I'm going to measure from there and go 7 feet to where the shoe was found, or the first red plastic piece was found, or whatever, right?
Yes.
Who told you where the pieces were found?
They were in Lieutenant Tully's report. He put measurements in his report.
Okay. And you noted that the shoe was 9 feet.
Yes.
You put that in your diagram.
Correct.
You noted that the glass cup was 1 foot from John O'Keefe's body, correct?
Correct.
1 foot is not that long, right?
Yes. They basically said I was found next to him.
Right.
Yes.
A piece of red plastic 7 feet from John O'Keefe's body, correct?
Correct.
A clear plastic piece 10 feet from John O'Keefe's body, right?
Yes.
And a red plastic piece 12 feet from John O'Keefe's body, correct?
Correct.
What part of his body were you measuring from?
Like center of mass.
So he's 6'2".
Yes.
Did Lieutenant Gallagher tell you where his center mass was?
No, I measured from. He just said he was here, so I tried to put like where his head, where his feet, and try to measure the middle between those two.
So ultimately, because Lieutenant Gallagher was not at the scene when he was found, Lieutenant Gallagher had to sort of guess where the body was found, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
You had no photographs of John O'Keefe in place, correct?
Correct.
There were no establishing shots, and there were no perspective shots, correct?
Correct.
There were no relative shots, meaning this is relative to that, I can measure that and figure out distances, correct?
What, like from the picture?
Yeah, so you know how that's done in science, right? You want to find out relative position of something, so you take 2 or 3 or 4 shots. You know that something is never going to move, like, I don't know, a flagpole. You can measure from there.
Sure.
You get cross coordinates, right?
Sure.
Left and right, and where the 2 coordinates match, that's where the item is, right?
Correct.
None of that was done, right?
From the pictures?
None of that was done to do your measurements.
Like I said, I used the measurements from. I measured on my diagram in itself, and I measured from those points off my diagram.
Right, but the starting point was a guess, wasn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you have to sort of guess at where you thought John O'Keefe's body was?
I didn't guess where his body was.
Did you guess at his center of mass?
Objection.
Did you guess?
I did not guess.
Next question.
You stated in your report that you Google mapped Miss Reed's path of travel. Well, let me ask you a different question. If I could withdraw that question with court permission.
Yes.
Your diagram has all those arrows pointing at specific locations, very, very specific, very thin arrows pointing, correct?
Yes.
If you start off with an incorrect assumption about where John O'Keefe's body was, right? Hypothetically, if you were to start off with an incorrect assumption where John O'Keefe's body was, every single item that you note on that diagram would then be off as well, wouldn't it?
Objection.
Is that true?
I mean, I guess hypothetically, depends on how off you want to be.
And the answer is yes, correct?
Hypothetically.
You stated in your report that you Google mapped Miss Reed's path of travel on January 29th based on what you determined to be, quote, it's likely the two, and you said that it's, quote, it's likely that the two events, meaning the triggering events, occurred at the same time the Lexus was at 34 Fairview at the time of the collision, correct?
Yes.
The first triggering event was what? Was it a three-point turn or a U-turn? I thought I heard you say both.
I guess it would be more, I mean, 3-point turns, essentially, I guess it's a 3-point turn.
Okay.
Yes.
What, did you say U-turn on Friday? I just want to heard that.
It could have been a U-turn, I mean, it's still turning around. So you had to make a U-turn when that's a 3-point turn or not, but it's still.
Okay, but I mean, not to be picky, but it's for my job.
Okay.
A U-turn, traveling in one direction, turn, right? Turning the wheel, never changing gear, since it's reverse or anything, just turn, right? A 3-point turn requires moving forward, stopping, changing gears, moving backward, stopping, changing gears, using steering input, and moving on, correct?
Correct.
Well, those are two very different maneuvers, right? You agree?
It's, in a sense, I was trying to say she made a U-turn. Like you can say they made a U-turn. It's a 3-point turn. They're still making a U-turn. And I didn't mean it as like she literally had to make a direct U-turn. She was turning around. And obviously the diagram, the trigger shows a 3-point turn.
Well, I mean, I guess you could have said reversing direction, right?
That would be a better way to say it, yes.
You didn't say that. You said U-turn. So are you changing your testimony from Friday that it was a 3-point turn, or could it possibly have been a U-turn? Just,
It's a 3-point turn.
okay, because you have evidence of the starting, stopping, changing gears, reversing, stopping, changing gears, turning.
That's correct.
So when you said U-turn, that was inaccurate.
Objection.
The objection sustained.
Let's get back to the path of travel when you began your analysis. How did you know what the Lexus's path of travel was that day?
I got the directions from Trooper Proctor.
And what did Trooper Proctor tell you in terms of the path of travel specifically? A starting point and an ending point tell you the exact path of Lexus travel.
No, all I got was mostly just the addresses.
Okay, so if you've got 2 points on a map, and Trooper Proctor told you the Lexus traveled from point A to point B, there are multiple ways to get from point A to point B. You agree with that, right?
Yes.
You picked one of those, right? The path of travel includes freeways, etc., right?
Yes.
But as you sit here, you don't know what her actual path of travel was. Because it could have been something different, right?
It could have been something. That's why I gave a range on my diagram.
Do you have any scientific evidence to establish what her actual path of travel is, or did you just guess at the path of travel?
I got the addresses from Trooper Proctor. I put them into the thing, and one of the possibilities of 36 miles, and that was after looking at all of them, at 36 miles is a possibility.
Right, understood. So that's what I'm trying to get to, Trooper Paul.
Okay.
That's one possibility. There's 36 miles,
Mm-hmm.
one route of travel, right?
Correct.
There are other possibilities, right?
Yes.
So between and among the possibility that you picked and the other possibilities, you just sort of have to guess. And there's no science to it. You just said, I'm going to pick that and put it in my report, right?
No, that's not how that worked.
Okay, why don't you tell me how that works?
Her odometer mileage on the car from the download and the time we had the vehicle shows 36 miles. So when I plugged those addresses into Google, it came up as 36 miles as a possibility.
And you knew that there was another route of travel to the same location, correct?
What do you mean?
There were alternative routes of travel to the same 2 points, from and to the same points, correct?
Yes. Yes.
You could have tried to extract the location data from Ms. Reed's cell phone to determine the exact route of travel, correct?
I don't know. I don't have access to do cell phone extractions.
So that answers my next question. You did not even attempt to do that, did you?
No.
You did attempt to analyze the key cycles for the Lexus in order to determine placement of that vehicle. You just talked about that with Mr. Lauter, right?
Yes.
I want to be clear for the jurors because most people have probably never heard of key cycles. A key cycle does not have any location data associated with it whatsoever, does it?
Correct.
It just shows you when a vehicle is turned on, the ignition is on, and off. That's one cycle, correct?
No.
Tell me what I've got wrong.
Key cycle of the car doesn't have to be turned on.
Say that again.
It goes from off to run. The engine doesn't have to be started to off.
Understood. So if it turns on, well, every single ignition is a key cycle. Every time the engine turns on, that's absolutely a key cycle. Once it's turned off again, right?
That gets recorded as an ignition cycle.
Right. So a key cycle can be an ignition cycle, but it doesn't have to be an ignition cycle. It also can be just turning the sort of accessory on, right?
Like the key cycle is turning the accessories on.
All right. But it doesn't. My question was, where we started with this conversation, is it does not have any location data on it whatsoever.
Correct.
All right. So when you drive your car, You walk out, get in the car, turn the ignition on, start to drive, get to your location, turn it off. That's one key cycle, right?
One ignition cycle.
But and I'm going to use the word key cycles because you use the word key cycles in your report. That's what we're talking about.
I'm using them because that's how the trigger was read.
That's how what?
The triggers were read on the text stream. That's how they read them. Key cycles.
By key cycles.
Yes.
I'm going to use that phrase key cycle.
Okay.
We're talking about the same thing. It's an ignition on, ignition off cycle.
Doesn't have to be on.
So you mean the engine doesn't have to be turned on?
Correct.
Right. But if you're seeing triggering events, I'll try to be tricky here. Seeing triggering events, the car's in motion. What does that tell you? The ignition's on or off?
The ignition's on.
Right. That's what I'm getting to. But it has no location data associated with whatsoever. It could be here, it could be in Wyoming. The car wouldn't know the difference. It's not to report the difference to you, correct?
On the key cycle,
Right.
on just the key cycle. The key cycle does not give out locations.
Say that again?
The key cycle does not give a location.
Right. So your analysis is trying to go from a known key cycle that you can figure out and then work backward from there to try to figure out where the car was on a particular ignition cycle or key cycle, correct?
I didn't use the key cycle to put it back.
Say that again?
I did not use the key cycle to place the car back in its location. The key cycles were, all I got from the key cycles is that they occurred close within proximity to the time we've had the vehicle, not basically saying that this was the location based off the key cycle.
Well, let's look at Exhibit 591 with the court's permission.
Okay.
Did you testify on Friday that this is a copy of the exhibit that was put in 591, this is part of your report, correct?
Yes, it is.
And this is a chart that shows when, look at this arrow, that arrow indicates top and bottom where your testing occurred, correct?
Yes.
And we move over to the left, that is key cycle what?
1164.
Right. So you've testified, and we can turn the lights on. You're all right. I don't mind if that stays up. You can turn the lights on. I don't think it hurts anything. You stated in your report that there were, quote, 2 triggers recorded on odometer 12629 and key cycle 1162, correct?
Yes.
These events were prior to the testing triggers on odometer readings 12665/12666 and at key cycle 1162. Right?
Yes.
Okay. So what you're saying in that report is the triggering events were 1162, going in reverse in order. 1162 comes before 1164. They're numerical. Is that right?
Yes.
Every single key cycle just tags another number on top of it, right? There's no formula.
Correct.
After 1 comes 2, after 2 comes 3, 4, 5, 6, and then move on, right?
Yes.
So by the time you got the vehicle, there had been 1,164 key cycles on the history of that car, correct?
Correct.
All right. And you knew, and you put in your report, the triggering events that you see under 1164, those are yours. And it's clear that you recorded, that you talked to Mr. Lally about, were 2,
Yes.
meaning ignition cycles at least, right?
Yes.
Stated in your report, well, let me finish. And the triggers that occurred while testing was 36 miles. You just said that, right?
Yes.
And the key cycle difference was exactly 2 key cycles, right?
Yes.
1164, 1163, 1162. That's the triggering events, right?
That's correct.
You also reiterated in your report in paragraph 23, 24, 26, and 29, and also in this exhibit in your car's report, that the triggers occurred at key cycle 1162, right?
Yes.
You were assisted in your car's report. I think you mentioned Trooper Zach Clark. Is that right?
Yes.
Trooper Proctor assisted to a certain degree, correct?
Yes.
Trooper Larini, Carol Larini, is that right?
Yes.
Also, Sergeant Sean Good at Canton PD assisted as well, correct?
Yes, in a sense.
Did they all read the report before it was finalized?
No.
Did you have any supervisor read the report before it was finalized?
Yes.
And he agreed with the assessments in the report?
Yes.
So in summary, everybody that read the report and you, who authored the report, believed, and it's reflected in that report, that key cycle 1162 contained the 2 triggers that you're talking about, right?
Yes.
That's the 3-point turn, I guess now a 3-point turn, right? Changing direction, and then the reverse at 24 miles per hour, correct?
Correct.
And you even went on and testified to that exact thing under oath in front of the state grand jury, correct?
Yes. Wait, hold on. I need the text streams?
On the key cycles.
Not in grand jury.
Okay. Testified to it on direct examination on Friday and again this morning.
Yes, correct.
If your testing occurred at key cycle 1164, that means you turned the engine on, the ignition on to start your testing, correct?
Correct.
And that triggering event that we see up there at 1164 initiated your testing, all right?
Yes.
All right. So that 1164 is where that's where there's no more unknowns, in other words. Right? You know exactly where the car is, who's in the car, who turned the car on, and what the triggering events were and what they reflected, because you did it, correct?
Correct.
It's you.
Yes.
So that would be the cornerstone, basically, of your entire analysis of key cycles.
Say again?
The cornerstone. In other words, the one known that is immovable, it's immutable, is 1164 began your testing. Is that right?
Objection.
Is that right? I'm going to allow the question.
Yeah, that's when the car was in state custody.
All right. So starting at 1164 and counting backward, before you started your testing, you know that the SUV had to be started, the ignition had to be turned over, and it was driven to the Sally Port in Canton at 5:31 p.m. from a tow truck on January 29th, correct?
I didn't know that.
You did or did not?
Did not know that.
Okay. Assuming that the car had to be started and put on a tow truck, that would be key cycle what?
I don't know how. I can't speak to the fact that that recorded a key cycle at that time.
I can't hear you.
I can't speak to the fact that we record a key cycle at that time.
Okay. If the car was turned on and driven onto a tow truck, would that be a key cycle?
I don't know because these keys record different ways, so I can't speak to how or why it did not record on there. All I can speak to is that those are the key cycles. The odometer mileage is more what I was going after on this whole thing.
Trooper Paul, you just said unequivocally, when a car is turned on and then turned off, there's a key cycle.
I said when the car without the ignition on, that's a key cycle.
Right.
That's correct.
That's what I mean, when it's turned on, when the engine turns on.
That's the definition of what it is. I can't speak to why I didn't go on, why I did not record.
Well, let's talk about the ignition cycles.
Okay.
Before 1164. Okay.
Okay.
Obviously, the car had to get to Canton PD because you saw it there, correct?
Correct.
Assume for purposes of my question, the car was turned on, and there's a video of it turning on, driving up onto a flatbed tow truck.
Yes.
That would be ignition cycle. I mean, use your word. Key cycle, ignition cycle, 1163, correct?
Again, ignition cycle, key cycles are two different things.
Which word do you want me to use?
If you want to talk about key cycles, key cycles. If you want to talk about ignition cycles, it's ignition cycles when the vehicle gets turned on. A key cycle does not mean to be turned on.
But every single ignition cycle includes a key cycle. You can't have an ignition cycle without a key cycle, correct?
Well, if you want to talk about just use the key cycles or ignition cycles, I'm trying to make sure this gets out. I'm sorry. I'm trying to make sure that this gets put out the correct way.
Every ignition cycle includes a key cycle, correct?
In a sense,
By definition, it has to, right?
it doesn't have to. They record multiple different ways.
You can have an ignition cycle without a key cycle.
I don't know how it recorded, but it could happen.
Explain that. How could that possibly happen?
Because a key cycle is when it turns on, not engine running, and then turns off.
Okay, so work with me here.
Ignition cycle is when it turns on, engine running for 2 seconds, and then comes off.
Okay, so
Or the 2 seconds is not on long enough, it might not record one.
okay, let's ignore the 2 seconds.
Okay.
That's not what we're doing.
Okay.
All right. Let's assume that it's an old-fashioned type of key.
Okay.
Okay. Halfway on, the electricity is on. It's like it used to be called ACC.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
That's a key cycle, correct?
For that intents and purposes, yes. This vehicle's not a key cycle. So not a
Then you
thing.
keep turning,
Okay.
and that turns the engine on, right?
That turns engine on, correct.
An ignition cycle, right?
Yes. Well, then turns off.
Single ignition cycle necessarily includes the precursor key cycle, correct? Even though every key cycle might not include an ignition cycle. Would you agree with that?
In that scenario, yes.
Fine. Okay, with that definition, I want to talk about ignition cycles because I don't want to get confused about accessories. Just assume the engine.
Okay.
turns on, right?
Okay.
If you started your testing at 1164, then if the engine was turned on, thereby initiating a key cycle, driving the car onto a flatbed truck, and then hauling it over to Canton PD, that would be key cycle 1163 in that hypothetical, correct?
It could be.
Okay. Then going backward from there, if the SUV was, I'm sorry, let me add one event that I just forgot. It had to get off the tow truck in Canton and be driven into the Sally Port. Did you ever see that video?
No.
Being driven in?
No.
If there was a video showing that the car was actually driven into the Sally Port, that would necessarily be a key cycle, correct?
Possibly.
Okay, so that would be key cycle 1163. My mistake, I was missing one, right?
Okay.
Before that, if the car was turned on and driven onto the flatbed to get to Canton, that would be key cycle 1162 in order, correct? We're going back.
It's possible.
All right. Before that, if the car was started and the car was driven from One Meadows Avenue to Karen Reed's parents' home in Dighton, that would be another key cycle, 1161, correct?
They're possible.
Before that, if the SUV was started and driven by Miss Reed from the garage at John O'Keefe's house to Jennifer McCabe's house at 5:07 in the morning, that would be another key cycle, correct? 1160. Is that right?
It's possible.
And before that, if the SUV was started and driven by Miss Reed to the waterfall, from the waterfall to 34 Fairview at approximately 12:15 a.m., that would be another key cycle, 1159, right?
It's possible.
I want to be clear. The reason that these numbers skip in your diagram, they don't go directly in order, right? Every single number is in order on this left-hand column, because this is only a diagram of when triggering events occur, right?
Yes.
Something unusual about the operation of the vehicle, correct?
Yes.
And it's clear that from the data, there was no triggering event at key cycle 1159, was there?
No.
So assuming the driving events that I just told you, right? Assuming for purposes of my question, that the driving events started at 11:59, driving over to 34 Fairview from the waterfall. Then driving at 5:07 in the morning over to Jenny Cave's house, 11:60. Then driving to Dighton, her parents' house, 11:61. Then the car being seized in Dighton by Trooper Proctor, 11:62. Then the car being taken off the flatbed and driven into the Sallyport at Canton, 11:63. Your testing starts at 11:64. That would mean that at 11:62, that key cycle would include the time in which Trooper Proctor had possession of that car, correct?
No.
Assuming my hypothetical.
Your hypothetical?
Yes.
If that's hypothetically how it works, then yes.
Then what?
If that's hypothetically how it works, then yes.
On June 9th, 2022, you were asked by a grand jury whether you knew or had done any scientific testing to determine the distance a body would actually travel struck by a vehicle. Remember that?
Not that specifically. Not in that way.
Do you remember answering that you had not, I'm just paraphrasing, that you had not done you hadn't finished your report yet?
Why don't you show him? He said he didn't remember it that way.
Yeah?
Yes.
Take a look at middle of the page. Your answer starts at about line 12, but the question above it is probably informative. You have that in mind?
Yep.
May I approach?
Yes.
You were asked, does that remind you that you were asked by a grand juror if you could calculate how far a body would move having been struck by a vehicle?
Yes.
And you indicated, quote, yeah, there's certain calculations we can do with that. Would figure out if you say if the car backed up, hit somebody, and then they go a certain amount of distance, and it's based on miles per hour, the speed of the vehicle, the striking vehicle, and stuff. Remember saying that?
Yes.
What did you mean by stuff?
I don't know.
You said that the calculations would be based on miles per hour and stuff. Did you ever do a stuff to test that? That's the grand juror's question.
No, we cannot calculate anything from this collision.
Say that one more time.
We cannot calculate anything from this collision.
Who's we?
I'm sorry, me, the role me.
Well, you know John O'Keefe's weight, right?
What's that?
You know John O'Keefe's weight, 217 pounds, right?
Yes.
Did you know that?
I don't know his weight now.
You know the weight of the vehicle?
Yes.
What's the weight of the vehicle, gross weight?
What's the gross weight?
Yeah.
I think it's approximately 7,300 pounds.
Okay. Were you able to calculate the mass of the vehicle?
I did not calculate the mass of the vehicle.
Well, you told the grand jury that you were planning on doing that kind of stuff to calculate how far a person would travel being struck at that speed with a car of that weight. You didn't do those calculations?
No, because the calculations would vastly underestimate the speed of the vehicle.
You testified, again, my report isn't done yet. I'm going to look into it. I'm looking into all that stuff, end quote, correct?
Yes.
There's that word again. It's been more than 2 years since that statement at the grand jury. Is your report finished?
Yes, it is.
Did you engage in any of those calculations?
I looked into it. This type of collision I would not be able to use the formulas for this type of collision.
Well, let's talk about those formulas. How would you calculate how far a body at rest would travel after being struck by an object in motion? How would you calculate that?
In pedestrian collisions, I use a Searle throw formula.
A what formula?
Searle.
What does that mean?
It's a type of formula that we use for a calculation of post-impact
So
speeds for pedestrians.
That includes certain principles of physics to calculate that, right?
What do you mean?
I'm sorry?
What do you mean by certain forms of physics?
There would be physics calculations that would be required to figure out how far a body at rest would move having been struck by an object in motion. That's a basic principle of
Yeah, I guess you could say though.
All right. Can you describe for the jurors exactly what calculations you would need to employ to determine how far a body at rest would travel, having been struck by an object in motion?
So in this scenario, in this collision, it's more of a side swipe. So he did not he did not get enough speed of the vehicle post impact with the vehicle to be able calculations. His center of mass was offset from the vehicle, so we would vastly underestimate his speed. So that's why I did not do a formula. If he was more in line with behind the vehicle, he would have been projected forward, and using that projection forward, he would have been able to get more closer to the actual speed of the vehicle during that post-impact travels.
Well, that presumes a couple of things, Super Paul. That presumes that he was quote-unquote sideswiped, right?
Presumed?
Presumed by you. You didn't see how he was hit, did you?
Based on the evidence, it appeared to be a side swipe.
That's your opinion.
That's just reading the evidence.
You're saying that the principles of physics as we know them today in modern mathematics is thwarted by a sideswipe?
Objection.
Is that what you're saying?
The calculations that are out there, you can get a speed, it'll just underestimate the speed.
You would have to know what the initial momentum of the object is that's in motion, correct?
Of what object?
The truck, Paul.
I would have to know that speed.
Yeah, you'd have to know what the initial momentum is, not speed, momentum. There's a difference.
Okay.
Right? Would you agree with that?
No.
You wouldn't have to calculate what the initial momentum is of the object in motion to determine the distance of the body at rest would move?
Well, in that sense, are we talking about trying to find the speed of the vehicle? That's usually what we're trying to do.
Right, okay. Well, let's put the speed of the vehicle aside. Let's talk about initial momentum. What's the formula for calculating initial momentum?
There's different types of momentum formulas.
Well, there's actually one type of momentum formula. It's to calculate momentum.
Objection.
Sustained.
To calculate momentum, there is a singular,
So sustained. Ask it differently.
isn't it true, Trooper Paul, that there is a singular calculation for determining initial momentum? That is P equals M times V, where P is the momentum. You're solving for that. M is mass. You multiply that by velocity. Is that right? Pretty simple.
You wouldn't use that in a pedestrian collision.
Oh, because the pedestrian's somehow magically out of the realm of physics?
Objection.
Sustained.
Is the pedestrian out of the realm of physics and calculations?
No, it's the weight differential between the pedestrian and the vehicle.
So if the vehicle is too heavy and the body is too light, you can't calculate the initial momentum of the vehicle?
Yes.
Got it. Where'd you learn that?
It's in my math class. We don't use momentum for a vehicle to vehicle.
Math class?
The crash reconstruction classes I have taken.
Got it. Would you need to apply the theory of conservation of momentum in calculating these data?
Do I need to calculate the conservation of momentum?
Or the conservation of momentum?
Yes.
You know what that is? There's an equation for that as well, right?
Yes.
You know what that is?
Not off the top of my head, but yes.
Based on the basic principles of physics, is the total momentum of the collision greater or less than the total momentum after the collision? Total momentum before the collision, is it greater or less than the total momentum after the collision? Basic question.
What type of collision?
Trooper Paul, they're exactly equal in all respects under the principles of physics, right? That's the theory of the conservation of momentum. Momentum doesn't change. It's just
Yes.
transferred from one body to another.
Yes.
Correct?
Correct.
Why didn't you say that to the jurors?
Objection.
Sustained.
Trooper Paul, if you were qualified to, quote, look into all this stuff, you would probably know these answers, wouldn't you?
Objection.
Sustained.
Are there any other calculations that you need to figure out the stuff that you were talking to about with the grand jury?
Objection.
Sustained.
How about calculating the final velocity of the objects after the collision? Would that be important?
What objects?
That would be John O'Keefe's body, sir. Object
I don't.
that you claim was flying through the air 30 feet.
Objection.
Sustained.
How about calculating the displacement using kinematic equations? Would you be able to do that?
The displacement of the body?
In order to calculate how far the body would move based on the mass of the object striking the body, could you use displacement using kinematic equations?
So, like I said before, the side swipe, he would not have gotten 100% of the vehicle, 100% of the speed of the striking vehicle. It would have vastly underestimated this vehicle. You couldn't hit a person and side swipe them, spin them off to the side, and have that and get a speed from those calculations.
So you're saying that the discipline of physics cannot figure out how far John O'Keefe's body would move, but you personally figured out that he would have flown now somewhat, or been projected somewhat 30 feet.
Objection.
All right?
Sustained.
Are you saying that the principles of physics are incapable of determining with the proper calculations how far John O'Keefe's body would have moved given the collision at issue?
Objection.
Is that what you're saying, Trooper?
No.
Okay, next question.
Well, you just said because it was a sideswipe, all these calculations, these physics calculations are inapplicable, right?
I'm saying it would underestimate the speed and the distance.
The truth is, Trooper Paul, you have no idea what all these physics calculations mean, do you?
Objection.
Sustained.
You've not been trained in physics formally, have you?
Yes.
You have been,
It's incorporated into the classes.
right? You have a few classes that use the word physics, but you haven't been formally trained in physics, have you?
Objection.
Sustained.
You haven't been formally trained in kinematics, correct? You
It's in the aspects of all our crash reconstruction classes.
haven't been formally trained and hold no degrees in biomechanics, do you?
I do not have a degree in biomechanics.
In fact, basically what you did in this case was calculated emission cycles, and you got those wrong, right?
Objection.
Sustained. Come on, Mr. Jackson. Ask the appropriate part of the question and you'll get it.
Let me ask you this. Based on your reconstruction, nearly 2-year investigation, exactly how was that taillight shattered? Explain it to us.
How does the taillight? Well, so the taillight in this case was shattered when it was struck John O'Keefe's arm.
Exactly what part of his arm?
Based on what I saw for his injuries, was from the upper part of his arm down.
Was his arm out and it just struck the arm on a hinge? Was it in front of him? You did the reconstruction?
It look-
Here's exactly how his body was positioned when he was struck by that.
So it looks like his arm is more kind of like this. If I can try to get that.
You're indicating out by his side, correct?
Yes.
All right. And the taillight would have struck his arm, right?
Yes.
Not his torso.
Yes.
Okay. So the full mass, the full weight of that truck hit him basically at the elbow. Is that right?
No,
Missing his
no.
torso.
I said it from the upper part of the arm
Right,
down.
at
Yeah.
the elbow and the biceps.
I didn't see anything that shows an indication that this lower torso was struck, but
Okay. So his torso-
it's not saying it could not have been a possibility, but I just didn't see anything.
So his torso was spared from being hit, but the arm took the brunt, the full force of the vehicle, correct?
Like arm and shoulder, yes.
Okay. And you said he then did a spin, like a sort of a pirouette?
He got spun around possibly the way he struck, it looked like he could have gone turned around counterclockwise.
Okay. So if he turns around counterclockwise, is he turning around in the air counterclockwise?
Yes, initially.
So he gets hit on the upper biceps, shoulder area, and down to the forearm, right?
Yes,
By an unbroken taillight, right?
yes,
In other words, it's nice and smooth. Nothing, no shards of plastic or anything broken at the time that made contact with his arm, right?
correct.
Okay, so how did his arm get all cut up?
Because when his arm struck the taillight then cracked, and as the car driving past him, the taillight could scratch it.
Got it. So he gets hit by the car, not his torso, just the arm. The taillight cracks, and as it passes by, his arm stays with it long enough to get striations, those scratches that we see, those lacerations, I'm sorry, those abrasions that we see, right?
In a sense, yes.
And at the same time, he does a pirouette and flies 30 feet to his final point of rest.
I don't know if he did a pirouette.
Well, I'm using the word pirouette. He spun around.
He started rotating counterclockwise. I don't know how far he ran counterclockwise, but he started rotating. According to that would push him to rotate counterclockwise. Whether he went counterclockwise all the way to his back toward the ground, it seems like the most likely possibility.
Did you account for the fact that his arm is on a hinge?
Is what? Say again?
Did you account for the fact in this scenario that you just told the jurors that his arm is on a hinge?
On a
It's called
hinge.
Shoulder.
Okay.
Right? So, the arm got hit. Didn't his arm just swing?
I said arm and shoulder area, so his arm could have been considered part of it.
Even if his shoulder got, the upper,
Okay.
pointing to his upper biceps.
Mhm.
Right? There's no injuries on his shoulder. Not a single one. Not even a bruise. Right?
Like I said, it looked like to me it was from up here. I don't know how far I can up back here, but it was up here.
Well,
So
the other one that talked about his injuries on his arm.
yes.
That's limited to about mid biceps, about mid forearm, right?
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
No injuries on the shoulder, no injuries on the torso, no injuries on the ribs, no injuries on the back, right? Is that right?
Yes.
So your theory is you got hit on the arm, took the brunt of the force from the taillight on the arm, stayed with the vehicle long enough for the taillight to explode, basically, to shatter. Then these striations get on his arm, abrasions. Does a pirouette, spin, counterclockwise, and flies 30 feet in the air to his point of rest.
Yeah, have to probably a little faster than that though.
I actually said he hit his head on the curb.
I said that's one of the possibilities of when you look at the roadway as he gets spun around kind of clockwise. It's a possibility that the curb is there. Any blunt force object on the ground, as the ground is pretty blunt.
Well, except in your scenario that you just told us, he flew through the air onto the light dusting of snow, grass, and dirt.
I didn't say through the air.
Say that again?
I didn't say he got thrown through the air.
Okay, I'll use your word. Got projected.
Projected doesn't mean it's not incorporating just throw. Project just means you get pushed forward. There's two parts of that. There's the air, then there's the ground. Like I said earlier, the tumbling, the rolling, whatever that part of the crash would happen. Projecting is just what we call what happens to a pedestrian post impact with a crash.
Okay, so a couple questions. If his arm, elbow, brunt of that entire impact, how do you account for the fact that he didn't suffer a broken bone?
I don't know.
How do you account for the fact that he didn't have a fracture?
Objection.
Sustained.
How do you account for the fact that he didn't even have a bruise on the arm?
Objection.
That's sustained too.
May we approach?
Yes.
May I inquire, Your Honor?
Yes.
The truth is, Trooper Paul, you know, having investigated auto pedestrian accidents in the past, that John O'Keefe's injuries do not look anything like an automobile pedestrian accident, do they?
Yes, I do.
Isn't it true, Trooper Paul, you came to these opinions and conclusions because Trooper Proctor told you to come to these opinions and conclusions in furtherance of his investigation?
That is not true.
That's why you have these opinions and conclusions that just don't make sense, correct?
That is not true.
And you're just trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
Objection.
Sustained. All right, jurors will take morning recess.
Now, with regard to your testimony as far as that triggering event, or the two events on 12,629B, you testified that that was consistent with a pedestrian collision, is that correct?
That's correct.
Again, if you could tell the jury, why is that consistent with a pedestrian collision?
The one specifically with the speeds and everything that we're referring to.
22 miles per hour in reverse for about 62 feet.
Okay, yeah, so why I think that's consistent with a pedestrian strike is because of the sudden change in the speed. It drops down by 0.5 mile per hour. The accelerator pedal is staying constant at the same percentage, and the steering wheel angle also turns to the right.
Now, your overall opinion is based on what you did as far as your construction, correct?
Yes.
Other information that you had at your disposal in formulating your opinion.
from other reports and stuff?
Yes.
Yes.
And that would include physical evidence, is that correct?
Correct.
And that would include witness statements,
Objection.
correct?
Sustained as to form.
What, if anything else, would that include?
The roadway evidence, witness statements.
And witness statements, would that also include statements of the defendant?
Correct.
Are you aware that the defendant indicated in a statement to troopers that she conducted a three-point turn in the area of 34th Fairview Road?
I'm going to allow that question.
Yes.
And what you observed in that triggering event is that from that mileage, is that consistent with the defendant's own statement?
Yes, it is.
Now, let me ask you a little bit, if you could, again, for the jury, clarify the difference between what you termed as an area of impact versus a point of impact.
Yes, an area impact is broader. It's a bigger area. Point to impact would mean something obviously right there. That would be the area impact.
If I could ask, the cell phone that was located under Mr. O'Keefe's body, that location, is that also consistent with the linear path that you were testifying about earlier?
Yes, it was.
And do you know whether or not that cell phone was in his hand or in his back pocket or somewhere else?
I do not know.
Now, as far as let me ask you this. You were shown some photographs of some taillight features near a fire, correct?
Yes.
As far as the area of impact, that was, from what you determined, that was Mr. O'Keefe's sneaker, is that correct?
Yeah, it was within that. When I would have had for non-initial evidence, I said the area impact was the start of that in that area prior to the
I'm
sneaker.
sorry,
So what I was saying was the area impact was prior to the area the sneaker was. It was in that path, just prior to that area.
And why did you determine that it was in that area?
Because that was the first point of evidence.
And first, I'm sorry, just first point of evidence in relation to what and sort of how the evidence was configured as it was evident to you.
That was pointed to me. It was the first point of evidence away from, for the sports evidence at that time that knew away from the pedestrian.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
And sir, I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 58. Do you recognize what's depicted in that photograph?
Yes.
And Your Honor, with the court's permission, if I publish that to the jury.
Okay, what exhibit number is it?
58.
Thank you.
Did you recall, do you recognize what's up on the screen?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize that?
There's 34 Fairview at the left side, and this is the fire hydrant.
And as far as these photographs and the photographs shown to you by Mr. Jackson on cross-examination, do you know when those photographs were taken?
I do not know specifically at what time those were taken.
You don't know if those photographs were taken on February 3rd, 2022?
Objection.
Is the objection sustained?
Now, Trooper, if you could, using the laser pointer, I know you've done this on the diagram, but if you could use the laser pointer with regard to what's on the screen as Exhibit 58, direct the jury's attention to where you believe the area of impact to be between the defendants, Lexus and Mr. O'Keefe.
It's probably somewhere out here.
And as far as that linear path that you were talking about from the area of impact, where did that go from and where did that go to?
So from, I think it's from like this way.
Okay, let's go and you can take that down. May I approach this for Trina? Now, Trooper, if you could explain to the jury as far as what you were describing as Mr. O'Keefe's post-impact movement, starting sort of with the point of impact between himself and the SUV to the point where he comes to final rest on the wall.
Yes, so he was struck along the right side in the area of his arm, and then he was, post-impact with the Lexus, he rotated counterclockwise and eventually hit the ground and came to final rest.
And the ground, based on your understanding of the weather conditions, was frozen at the time, is that correct?
Objection.
Sustained. Watch the form, Mr. Lally.
Yes, sir. So as far as anything in your testimony about Mr. O'Keefe's actions, does that involve pirouette?
No.
So there's a rotation, is that correct?
Correct.
And as far as 30 feet in the air, do you have any opinion as to whether or not he flew 30 feet in the air?
I don't have any evidence that he would have flown 30 feet in the air.
And so as far as from your training experience when it comes to pedestrian collisions, are you able to determine or calculate how much distance someone is in the air and how much distance someone sort of rolls or tumbles to their final resting position?
Say it again.
From your training experience,
Yes.
based on this collision, are you able to determine how far Mr. O'Keefe was traveling in the air versus how far he traveled tumbling or rolling after he hit the ground?
I do not have a calculation for this specific style of pedestrian crash due to the side swipe. So if I did, I could use the formula. It would just vastly underestimate the speed of the vehicle.
Let me ask you a little bit about it. You're talking about the Searle pedestrian throw formula, correct?
Correct.
And that's something developed in the course of physics specific to reconstruction by someone named Dr. Searle, correct?
Correct.
And that's S-E-A-R-L-E, is that correct?
That is correct.
And with respect to Dr. Searle's formula, why is that inapplicable in side swipe collision versus some other type of collision?
Because it takes in, it's looking for more, not so much the formula, it's how much projection efficiency that would occur, how much percentage of the speed of the striking vehicle would have happened. In order for the formula to work, the more of the body would have struck the vehicle, the more efficient the outcome would be in the speed.
In the center of mass that you were talking about, sort of in the collision sequence, what, if any, role does that play in regard to your ability to do that calculation?
It would just, like I said, it would underestimate the speed of the striking vehicle due to a center mass not within the rear of the vehicle.
And not to twist your words or anything, but as far as when you say underestimate, that would not be an accurate reflection of the defendant's vehicle speed, correct?
Correct.
Now, you asked some questions about the glass and indicated that there are a number of reasons why the glass would travel with him, being Mr. O'Keefe. Can you explain what those are?
Yeah, the glass could have struck the vehicle also in the same way. It could have still been attached to his hand and still gone with him in the same way. It could have been attached to his body in midair. That's the multiple ways that the glass would have stayed with him.
Now, in speaking of collision sequences, particularly collisions involving multiple vehicles, vehicles are fixed with bumpers, correct?
Correct.
What's the purpose of a bumper on a vehicle?
To help absorb the
Scope?
Yes, yeah.
Sustained.
Your Honor, if I may? I don't believe it is.
So why don't we come to sidebar?
So I'm sorry, again, if I could ask you, what is the purpose of a bumper on a vehicle?
it's there to help absorb energy from a collision.
And with reference to the scratches that you were asked about on the vehicle on sort of the right rear quarter panel, what, if any, relationship does bumpers or their interaction have to your opinion as it relates to that?
Sorry, say it again.
With respect to what you just testified about bumpers, you were also asked some questions about scratches on the right rear quarter panel of the vehicle, correct?
Correct.
And what, if any, relationship does the bumpers on the vehicle and sort of their intended purpose have with relation to the scratches that you observed?
So the bumpers on the side was more of this wasn't more of a direct on hit with a bumper. It was more of the side scraping of the paint of the bumper.
Now, the presence of Mr. O'Keefe's DNA on the tail light, is that consistent with a pedestrian collision?
Yes.
Now, as far as the glass not matching, are you aware that the lab's actual findings were that the glass on the bumper and the glass on the roadway was not found to be consistent with each other? Is that your understanding? If you know.
I don't know.
And were you also aware that the lab's finding was that the glass on the bumper was consistent with the glass on the roadway?
I'm not aware what the lab said.
Now, in order to construct your diagrams, your testimony, I believe, was that you had used the CERT diagrams in the process of that. Is that correct?
Yes.
And if I could turn back to that 12629B, the mileage from the tech stream data.
Yes.
The 3-point turn that you observed and the 24.2 mile per hour straight line for approximately 62 feet, how far apart time-wise within that particular triggering event were those two incidents?
8 minutes.
And as far as any of the other tech stream data that you observed, was there any other triggering event that included a 3-point turn?
No.
Now, as far as the defendant's path of travel, is it your understanding that that was obtained from a multitude of different witnesses?
Yes.
Now, with reference to, you were asked some questions about the defendant's cell phone, as far as GPS locations. Were you aware that the defendant's cell phone wasn't able to be accessed until by law enforcement until 2023?
Sustained.
Were you aware that the defendant's cell phone had GPS locations turned off on the defendant's cell phone?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
I was not aware.
Now, as far as placing the vehicle during that triggering event, 12629B, did you use key cycles to put it back at that location at that time?
No, I didn't.
What did you use?
I looked at the odometer mileage
And why would you look at the odometer mileage over the key cycles?
because I can physically see the odometer mileage at the vehicle at the time of my inspection.
And why would, well, let me ask you this. In your opinion, as far as that is concerned, sort of backtracking to a specific location, which is more reliable, the odometer or the key cycles?
I would say the odometer mileage.
And why is that?
Like I said, you can physically see it when you turn the car, and I know that's the odometer mileage that it's reading on the dashboard.
And every key cycle, is that necessarily recorded within the tech stream data?
No.
And why not so?
It only records stuff that related to the triggers.
They don't what?
They only record stuff that is related to the triggers.
Okay, thank you.
As far as counsel's hypothetical with regard to the key cycles, is it your opinion that that hypothetical is accurate or inaccurate?
Inaccurate.
And why so?
Because you also add the odometer mileage onto the key cycle, so those key cycles and odometer mileage are on the same trigger, and plus the data seems consistent with everything else that's going on with this collision.
Now, fair to say that you were not outside of 34 Fairview Road on January 29th, sometime around 12:20 to 12:30 a.m., is that correct?
That's correct.
And so fair to say that you don't know exactly how Mr. O'Keefe and or Glass or anything that he's holding interacted with the defendant's vehicle at that time?
Objection.
I'll allow it. Is that true?
I do not.
And so based on your training and experience and the number of pedestrian crashes that you've investigated, again, if you could, one last time, just describe to the jury how you believe the vehicle interacted with Mr. O'Keefe and why.
Objection.
Sustained. It's asked and answered.
With reference to what you've described as far as the interaction between Mr. O'Keefe and the vehicle, why is that your opinion?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
Based on the evidence from the vehicle, based on the injuries to John O'Keefe, the tail light appears to be broken and it's sharp plastic pieces that could have ripped his arm, and also the dent with the scratches above it is consistent with a hand holding a glass and the glass on top, smashing on the vehicle, and the hand smashing the vehicle. You can see there's a line between scratches and a dent there.
Yeah, just Romeo. Very briefly, I just want to make sure I clear something up about the key cycles. You're not suggesting that every key cycle in the history of the car is on this page, right?
That's correct.
I'm pulling up Exhibit 591.
Okay.
That indicates key cycles that have triggering events, correct?
Yes.
Triggering events are something that the manufacturer includes basically a list of items that will be a triggering event, correct?
Yes.
It's a list of items basically for mechanics to figure out if there's some unusual driving or unusual event with the vehicle, correct?
Yes.
But the key cycles go in order. They're numerical, 1 through whatever.
Correct.
And the hypothetical that I gave you on cross-examination, with those driving incidents, each one of those would represent a key cycle, correct?
So in your hypothetical, I mean, assume that it should create a key cycle, but that you can't just say that key cycle is from that because I didn't just use key cycles. I used the odometer mileage on top of it. So you have to have key cycle and odometer.
Right. Interestingly, though, when you testified on direct examination, you said your analysis, this was on Friday, before the weekend. By the way, over the weekend, did you watch anything on, I don't know, YouTube or any social media?
No.
Nothing?
No.
No. Did you have any conversations with Mr. Lally about these key cycles and problems?
No.
Did you have any conversations with anybody about the issues with the key cycles?
No.
Did you realize at some point between Friday and today that I was probably going to ask you some questions about key cycles?
Objection.
Did you realize that yourself?
I assumed you would ask me loads of information.
So on Friday, you didn't mention that your analysis was based on mileage, did you?
Objection.
Sustained.
On Friday, did you mention that your analysis was predicated on mileage?
Objection.
I'll see you at sidebar. Yes.
Paul, on Friday, you indicated pretty clearly that your analysis was based on the key cycles, starting at 1164 when you started your testing, and 1162, which was the key cycle you claimed on Friday was at 3450.
It wasn't based on it. That's how I describe it. I said key cycles. I based it on they were close within proximity to each other, but I've always said it's key cycles and odometer mileage, plus all the information within the triggers themselves. So it wasn't just one of the other.
And you said on Friday that once you started your testing at 1164, it was 2 cycles earlier that had the triggering events, meaning 1162, that you claimed were 3450.
Yes.
But in the hypothetical, if there were 4 events, 4 driving, 4 key cycle events between 1164 and 1159, it could not have occurred at 1162, correct? 3450. In my hypothetical.
In your hypothetical, if it recorded a key cycle, then your hypothetical is correct.
Right. And last question: if you got the route of travel incorrect, if your presumption of the route of travel was incorrect on that vehicle in the days earlier, then your mileage would be incorrect also, correct?
Mileage from what? The odometer or from?
The odometer reading.
The odometer reading is the odometer reading. It's 36.
My point is, your analysis that's based on the odometer reading, 36 miles here, 12 miles there, 2 miles here, 5 miles there. If you got the route of travel wrong and the route of travel was different, your assumptions about the odometer readings would be incorrect as well, correct?
So what I'm
You got the path of travel wrong.
So I purposely put down a range on my Google images showing, because I couldn't tell you her definitively route of path for every single way, but I know that it's possibly a possibility that she could travel 36 miles within those locations that she traveled post leaving Fairview Road.
Or if that mileage was put on at key cycle 1162, then that would mean that the vehicle would already be in Massachusetts custody, right? The proctor's custody.
Objection.
So that's beyond the scope.
That's all I have.
All right, Mr. Lally?
Just very briefly. The range that you came up with for the defendant's path of travel, does that fit with the path of travel, the odometer reading, putting the defendant's vehicle in the area of 34 Fairview Road when it does a 3-point turn, and then 8 minutes later when it travels 24.2 miles per hour in a straight line in reverse for approximately 62 feet?
Yes.
Nothing further.
All right, you are all set.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, so jurors, we're going to take another short break to set up some things in the court, okay?
All right, so the court, please.